Welcome to the deep dive. Today, forget everything you thought you knew about just, stuffing keywords onto a page.
Right.
We're diving headfirst into something way more powerful for making your online content truly connect.
Yeah, we're talking about understanding and leveraging entities in SEO.
Entities, it sounds a bit technical, but think of it as unlocking a secret level in how Google actually gets what your content is all about.
Exactly. We've been digging through some fascinating material sources that really shine a light on this entity SEO and its um, game-changing role in semantic search.
Okay, so what's the mission for listeners today?
It's pretty clear. We're going to demystify these so-called entities. We want to show you why they're not just some techie buzzword, but really the key to optimizing your online presence for how search engines work now.
All right, entities.
Yeah.
It still feels a little abstract. What are we actually talking about? Like, break it down.
Okay. At its heart, think of an entity as a real-world thing that your website mentions. It could be a person, a place, maybe a product, even an idea.
A thing, okay.
It's a single identifiable object or concept. And the big shift is that Google is moving beyond just looking at the individual words on your page.
Right.
It's trying to understand what those things are and, crucially, how they relate to each other. That's really the essence of entity SEO.
So if I mention Jaguar, Google wants to know car, animal, the old computer.
Precisely. Entities help clarify that. It's about disambiguation.
So instead of just seeing words, Google's trying to see the actual subjects, the topics we're discussing.
Exactly right. Entities are, you could say, the fundamental building blocks of how information systems organize information. They represent those real or abstract objects.
Well, what makes them identifiable?
It's their unique properties, their attributes, like a name, a birth date for a person, an address for a place. But just as important are their relationships, their connections to other entities.
Like a network.
Think of it exactly like a network, yeah. Understanding those relationships is how Google differentiates between things and grasps the bigger picture. It understands Arnold Schwarzenegger is related to the entity Terminator, which is related to the entity James Cameron.
Okay, I get the building blocks idea, the network. So what was the big shift? When did Google really start focusing on this so heavily?
That brings us to a really pivotal moment. The Google Hummingbird update. Remember that? Back in September 2013.
Vaguely, yeah. It was a big algorithm change, right?
Wasn't just a minor tweak. It was fundamental. The whole goal was to move away from simply matching keywords in a search query.
To actually understanding the meaning behind what you were searching for.
Exactly. Hummingbird was like Google putting on its thinking cap, trying to grasp the concept, not just the words. And it used this understanding of entities to pinpoint meaningful content much more accurately.
Yeah.
By recognizing these distinct concepts, Google could understand the context, the intent behind searches. It led to much better results, especially for, more complex or conversational queries.
And all the big updates since then build on this.
Pretty much, yeah. Things like RankBrain, EAT, BERT, MUM, they're all related to this evolution towards semantic understanding. And entities are absolutely central to that.
So for Google, these clearly defined entities are like little nuggets of unambiguous information in the massive chaos of the internet.
That's a great way to put it. Well-defined, distinguishable entities are essential for Google to fine-tune its search results pages, its ERPCs, and most importantly, to truly understand what you, the person searching, are really trying to find. It's all about deciphering user intent.
Right. So how does this translate for someone doing SEO? How do entities become important for getting your website ranked?
Well, like we said, search engines, especially Google, are constantly identifying and categorizing these entities: people, places, things, concepts.
Okay.
Their importance for SEO is huge because they allow search engines to understand user queries on a much deeper level. And that means delivering results that are genuinely relevant to what the user meant, not just what they typed.
So it's not just about hoping the right keywords are on your page anymore, that old school approach.
Not just that, no.
Yeah.
Analyzing the connections, the relationships between entities is critical now. This helps Google's crawlers understand the context of a search query, leading to much more precise results.
Like your Terminator example earlier.
Exactly. Or think local search. If you search best pizza near me, Google needs to identify relevant entities, pizza restaurants that are also geographically near your location. Entities make that possible.
Okay, so Google's trying to map out these entities and how they connect across the entire web.
Yeah.
How does it actually do that on such a massive scale? It's not like there's someone at Google HQ with a giant whiteboard, right?
Huh? No, definitely not manually. Google relies heavily, heavily, on machine learning and artificial intelligence.
The algorithms.
Right. They're trained to spot patterns and relationships within the enormous amounts of data it processes. This includes identifying entities and figuring out how they're connected.
Then how do we help it?
A really important piece of this puzzle is structured data. Schema markup, basically.
Ah, schema.org.
Yep. By adding structured data markup to your website, you're essentially giving Google very clear signals, like little labels, about the entities you're talking about on your pages. Makes them much easier to identify and understand.
So structured data is like adding those precise labels for Google.
Exactly. And think of the Google Knowledge Graph as this massive, constantly updated encyclopedia of all these categorized entities.
Right, the box that sometimes shows up on the side of search results.
It's often powered by it, yes.
Yeah.
Data tags on your website, that structured data, helps feed information directly into this knowledge graph.
And what if you don't use structured data? If entities are just mentioned in the text?
Google can likely still figure them out. Its NLP is pretty sophisticated, but the relationships between them might not be as obvious or as certain to the algorithm without that explicit markup.
Okay. What else helps Google identify them?
Well, user interactions are a big one. What people search for, what results they click on. That all provides clues about which entities are relevant and how they connect.
And Google uses its own knowledge graph of data too, right, to connect the dots.
Precisely. It cross-references information. If it sees an entity mentioned on your site, and it already knows about that entity from, say, Wikipedia or Wikidata, it can link that information, building a more complete understanding. It's a continuous learning process.
You mentioned the knowledge graph, and that sounds like it ties into this idea of the semantic web I've heard about. What exactly is that?
Good question. The semantic web is, it's essentially an initiative, a vision, to organize all the information online in a much more interconnected and meaningful way. It's about making web data machine readable.
Machine readable.
Yeah, so computers can understand the meaning and relationships. It uses technical frameworks like RDF, that's the Resource Description Framework. It's a standard way to describe data and the relationships between different pieces of data.
Okay.
And then you have things called ontologies and taxonomies. Think of them as formal systems for defining terms and their meanings. They help computers, and therefore search engines, interpret information more accurately.
So it's like building a giant interconnected database of knowledge where everything knows how it relates to everything else, almost like a global brain.
That's a great way to think about it, yeah. A web of data, not just documents. And Google absolutely taps into these semantic web principles.
How does that help my search for, say, a Berliner?
Ah, perfect example. The semantic web helps Google understand the intent behind your search. Are you looking for a person from Berlin? Or the pastry, the donut?
Right, context.
Exactly. By understanding these linked data points, the entities and their relationships defined using things like structured data, knowledge graphs, and ontologies, Google can figure out you probably mean the pastry, if you're also searching for bakeries, and show you relevant results. It dramatically improves the quality and relevance.
Okay, so entities are clearly crucial for Google to understand our content, make sense of the web. Why does that translate into being so important for SEO, for actually getting seen?
Well, to put it simply, because entities help search engines understand the relevance and the context of your content.
Which leads to
More accurate search results pages. And crucially for website owners, it can lead to higher rankings for the queries that actually matter most.
So if I do a good job with entities,
If you're effectively using entities in your content, and importantly, your metadata, like structured data, you're significantly increasing the chances that your web page will be shown when someone searches for those related entities or concepts.
it's like speaking Google's preferred language now.
Exactly. You're feeding it information in a way it's designed to understand deeply. And remember, Google's natural language processing, NLP, it's getting incredibly good at understanding the relationships between entities just through the way we naturally write.
So good writing helps too.
Absolutely. Clear writing that shows the connections. Plus, by intelligently linking different entities within your content, internal linking, you can seriously improve the user experience. You help people discover related information easily on your site.
And marking them up helps beyond Google too.
Yeah, that's a good point. Properly marking up your entities with structured data allows other information services across the web, not just Google, to read and understand your data. That can broaden the reach and categorization of your content. Think databases, apps, voice assistants.
Okay, this sounds powerful. So What are some concrete things someone listening right now can actually do to start optimizing their website for entities? Give us the actionable steps.
All right, number one, and this is key, implement structured data markup, schema.org, for the main entities featured on your key web pages. Give search engines that explicit information.
The labels we talked about.
Okay.
What else?
Second, keywords aren't dead, but think beyond just keywords. Consider the related terms and synonyms that help connect different entities thematically. You're building that semantic context.
So focus on the topic, not just the word.
Exactly. Focus on making the relationships between the entities in your written content really clear. And there's a cool tool, the Google NLP demo.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
You can paste your text into it, and it'll show you which entities Google identifies and how it classifies them. It's a great way to see if you're communicating clearly to the machine.
That sounds really useful. We should link to that. What else?
Develop a smart internal linking strategy. Don't just link randomly. Use anchor text that clearly reflects the relationship between the page you're on and the page you're linking to, in terms of the entities involved.
Makes sense. Connect the dots on your own site.
Yeah. Also, link your official social media profiles and listings on reputable online directories, like your Google business profile, to the relevant entities. This helps build trust and authority.
Establish your entity's presence online.
Exactly. And finally, don't be afraid to link out. Where it makes sense and adds value for the reader, link to authoritative pages about those entities on other trusted websites or within relevant external databases like Wikipedia or Wikidata. Google often cross-references this info.
Okay, you mentioned SameAs earlier. Can you dive a bit deeper into how that specific piece fits into structured data for entity optimization?
Absolutely. Using the schema.sameas property within your structured data is, well, it's vital. Really vital for boosting your semantic SEO related to a specific entity.
Why vital?
Think back to the knowledge graph. It's all about mapping relationships, right? Keywords help people find info related to an entity. But SameAs within your structured data is your way of definitively saying to Google and other machines, the entity I'm talking about on this page is the very same entity as this well-known one defined over here.
Over where? Like Wikipedia.
Exactly. Often it's a link to its official Wikidata entry or its Wikipedia page, or maybe its official website URL. It provides a clear, unambiguous link.
Ah, so it nails down which entity you mean beyond doubt.
Precisely. It removes ambiguity. It helps Google and other information services understand exactly which entity you're referring to, strengthening their understanding and improving the chances your content gets connected correctly in their graph. It's a really important technical SEO tactic.
And this directly influences those Google Knowledge panels, right? The boxes that pop up for famous people or companies.
It's directly. Entities are the absolute foundation for those informative Google Knowledge panels. When you see one for a notable person, a company, a movie, that's Google pulling together information about a specific entity.
And structured data fuels that.
It provides crucial fuel. Using those schema.org tags embedded in your website's code gives Google the additional context, the specific attributes, the relationships that help it assemble and display those rich knowledge panels accurately.
So these advanced search engines like Google are essentially becoming massive entity databases themselves, constantly pulling in and connecting information.
That's a very accurate way to describe it. The Google Knowledge Graph itself relies heavily on structured data gathered from countless sources, but particularly authoritative ones like Wikipedia and especially the open source Wikidata project.
Wikidata.
Yeah, Wikidata is super important. It's a community-driven central hub for structured data that anyone can contribute to. It feeds many services, including Google.
And having a unique ID for each entity is key.
Crucial. Unique identification is essential to avoid confusion or misinterpretation. You need to know this Michael Jackson is the singer, not someone else with the same name. And structured data, as we've said, is how search engines categorize and understand the specific features and relationships of all these distinct entities.
Okay, let's circle back to basics for a second, just to be crystal clear. What's the fundamental difference between the keywords we've always focused on in SEO and these entities?
That's a really important distinction to grasp. The core difference lies in what they are. Entities are specific, uniquely identifiable objects or concepts. They have defined characteristics. They exist, so to speak.
Like a person, place, or thing?
Exactly. Keywords, on the other hand, are simply the words or short phrases that people type into a search engine. They're the language used to find information.
So keywords are the search terms, the queries, and entities are the actual things those queries are about.
You nailed it. Keywords help determine relevance for specific search queries. They are the terms people use. Entities are the actual subjects or concepts that those queries are ultimately about.
And entities allow for deeper understanding.
Yes, because entities have inherent attributes and relationships, they enable a much deeper level of semantic analysis than just matching keywords. Keywords are often used to optimize things like meta tags, headings, the visible text. Entities are leveraged more through structured data and help unlock richer presentations in the search results, like those rich snippets or knowledge panels.
The resources you shared included a table outlining some of these differences. Can we touch on maybe one or two key points from that?
Sure, one key difference is the level of abstraction or specificity. Keywords tend to be more general, right? Like running shoes.
Mm-hmm.
An entity related to that might be Nike Air Zoom Pegasus 39, a very specific identifiable product.
Much more concrete.
Exactly. Another important distinction is context dependence. Keywords can be ambiguous. Their meaning often depends heavily on the surrounding words. Apple, again. Entities generally have a more consistent and defined meaning regardless of the immediate context because they represent that specific thing.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, there was also a distinction made in the materials between named entities and broader concepts. What's the difference there?
Good point. Named entities are specific, named objects or terms with a clear, distinct identity. Proper nouns, basically,
Bigger?
like Paris, Microsoft, Leonardo da Vinci, things you can point to, literally or figuratively. Concepts, though, are more abstract, general ideas or themes, like freedom, artificial intelligence, climate change. These are broader ideas, not single identifiable instances.
So, a named entity is a specific thing with a name, and a concept is more of a general idea or category.
Precisely. As the comparison table in our resources highlighted, named entities have clear identification, often a proper name. Concepts are more abstract, encompassing a wider range of interpretations.
And context matters more for concepts.
Generally, yes. Named entities tend to be less reliant on context for their core, meaning Mount Everest is Mount Everest. But a concept like success can be interpreted very differently depending on the situation. In natural language processing, there's a specific task called named entity recognition, or NER, which focuses just on finding these concrete named entities in text.
And understanding concepts helps Google with the broader topic.
Exactly. Understanding concepts helps search engines grasp the overall themes and topics within a piece of content, even if specific named entities aren't the main focus. Both are important for semantic understanding.
Wow. Okay, this has been a really eye-opening discussion on entities. So, to wrap things up, what's the single most important thing our listeners should take away from this deep dive?
I think the key takeaway is this. Understanding and strategically leveraging entities is no longer some optional advanced SEO tactic. It's really, well, it's fundamental. It's a requirement for success in today's search landscape.
So, get on board or get left behind.
Pretty much. By clearly identifying the entities that are central to your content and explicitly defining their relationships using structured data, using clear writing, using smart linking, you significantly improve your website's ability to be understood by search engines like Google.
And the result.
Greater visibility, better relevance in the search results that matter. You're aligning with how search actually works now.
Makes perfect sense. And that brings us to our final thought for you, the listener, to consider. Given how search engines are increasingly focused not just on words, but on understanding the meaning behind information, how will this ongoing evolution towards entity-based understanding continue to reshape the way we discover information online, and maybe even how we create content?
Yeah. Think about the implications for your own online presence, sure, but also just for how you make sense of the vast amount of information that's out there.
Yeah.
How will this web of things change things?
Something to chew on. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.